afraid of watercolors. So I really enjoy debunking that and showing you how much fun it could be and how all those, what we think are mistakes or whatever is not that at all. So I have a scene today. Well, I'll just switch cameras. This was something we were working on in one of our classes on Tuesday. I have yet to finish my pumpkins there, but this was what I wanted to do today, which is a photo from one of my students. It's her grandchildren, and they're sort of in this pumpkin field, and they got some pumpkins in their wagon, and the two of them with the silhouette. So I have what I call a contour drawing here. So I am just going to get started and show you my way of approaching this. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my supplies and whatnot as we get into this. So, and then I can also zoom in a little bit. Let me zoom into this just a tiny bit. That's not zooming. Oh, there we go. Okay, there's a little bit of a zoom. Too much. Okay. So what I like to do is sort of start with the sky, and I'll use usually a cerulean to do that. There are some really nice cloud formations in this photograph. I'll try to keep the photo kind of in place so that you could see it as I'm doing it. I know that that's been requested in the past, so I'm happy to show you that. So this is cerulean, and I'm just sort of giving some of those white puffy clouds. I never really feel compelled to do exactly what I see because I like changing things up, but that's just the way I look at it. I know a lot of people feel that they see it and therefore that must be painted, and I am not of that philosophy at all. So I'm just carrying this down a little bit. Underneath the clouds, you'll see there's a little bit of that violet. So I'm just going to add a little bit of violet just to deepen underneath a little bit. I'm dropping it into wet. And that's just a great way that I love to work. It's one of the beautiful things about watercolor is the fact that we can do things like this. And then I'm just feathering it up ever so slightly. And I would, so that it's not too fussy. It's really not about the cloud formation. It's just to show that that's a sky. Now, this horizon line is sort of got these orangey, burnt orange kind of color going on there. So what I'm going to drop in is a little bit of a deep orange on, that's my light orange. So I'm starting with a light orange. Okay, so forget that. So I'm going in here and I'm dropping in this orange, and you'll notice that I dropped his head a little bit into the horizon. Those are the kinds of things that I like to make changes when I do it, just to see a good horizon line. Your photo may not have it, so I like to suggest that. Using one of my favorite colors on the bottom here, a little bit of dragon's blood, very nice, deep, rich orange. And I'm taking my brush and just feathering this up a little bit. Excuse me. And what's happening now is that this is softly going into the background. So what happens is that I like a background to sort of go very soft and unobscured, because I feel that that's not the conversation. And of course, when we look at a photograph, we see everything in perfect sharpness because that's what our cameras do. But I like the idea of it being a soft focus. So all of this movement, I'm going to jump to my other camera right now so you could see a little bit closer exactly what's happening, how this color is just moving on its own right into the sky. And those are the kinds of things that I not only look forward to, those are the things that I like to encourage. So, and I know they're scary, but that is really makes for such a great painting. And so by throwing it into a very soft focus gives you, I think it's called depth of field. if I know my photography correctly. So that's sort of what I'm giving here. Now there's this path going along here. Let me back out a little bit. So there's this path here that I'm just sort of painting with water and going around them. And I'm going to drop in all of my great colors and just let them move as they wish to. I can call out and make them more pumpkin-y as time goes on. I don't have to do it right now, but I can, you know, down the road. These are things that I could. It's just, again, soft focus and saying there's something here, and we don't have to necessarily be overly descriptive what it is, because they're on this path, they're walking with their pumpkins in their wagon, and beyond that, that's not the story. So I like to talk about what is the story. And the story is that these two children are picking their pumpkins, and they are in this pumpkin patch, and it's just this beautiful fall crisp day. So that's my story. And of course, it's all about the long shadows that happen this time of year. And by just dropping in some of these little marks here, what I'm doing is I'm just suggesting right now that something's sort of going on. So all these pumpkins become something of shapes. And I also did something. She's not holding anything in the photo. So what I did was I added a pumpkin in her hand, because I thought that would just be fabulous. So that's what I did. So I'm just changing the narrative ever so slightly, not a lot, but just ever so slightly, just to have it make sense for me. I'll zoom a little bit on that one, and that's where I'm at. Now, in addition to dropping in all of these browns and orange colors, actually I haven't dropped any brown in, I can also drop in a little bit of cerulean. And the cerulean, along with the orange, become complementary colors. And what happens is they kind of cancel each other out, and they create a very nice, beautiful brown tone, because they are complementary colors, meaning they're opposite each other on the color wheel. And what happens is when you work with complements, my students know this, when you work with a complementary color, what's happening is you are, when they sit next to each other, it's very vibrant and very active, which is, I'm going to just put this in front of here for a second. The blue and the orange, those are complements. So they really pop each other out. But when they touch, they mute each other down a little bit. So that's what I'm sort of doing here, is I'm achieving a couple of things. I'm saying a complementary color will help the painting to look more interesting rather than just all these orange tones. But the other thing that I'm really achieving is that I'm sitting these colors next to the orange pumpkin, because that's a big part of the conversation. And I think I'm going to do it a little bit over here, so that when I do add the orange to my pumpkins in the foreground, what will happen is they will really pop. And you'll see a little bit more of that as we get into it. But it's sort of muted. And what I say is that this is kind of a nice way to make things painterly. And so I like the idea of things, looking at things painterly. You have the photo, so we really don't need more conversation with the photo. We have the photo. This is the photo right here. So I'm going to, sorry, it was just getting in my way, so I just pushed it aside a little bit. And I want to get some of this foreground color in here sooner than later, so that it starts to dry. And that will help me also to build the shadows underneath the long shadow of the wagon, all of that will really be underneath, on top of, I should say, on top of this nice color here. So that's just water. So I'm going to add a little bit of my color just to the foreground here. And what will happen is when I put my shadow down, it will be on top of that foreground color. I'm going to take my dot sprayer and just hit that background a little bit. What happens is that, I'll show you closely, what that does is it just creates a little bit of a disruption to the foreground and the background. And so it drops in water droplets, which is really a great way to move color on your paper. And I'm just going to add a little bit more down here. And then I really want to get into the pumpkins and the figures, which is really what this whole thing is really all for. So what I would say is don't get too caught up in things that don't matter. Just because you see them doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean you have to paint them. It doesn't mean that you have to depict every single thing you see. Now I just switched to my rigger. And what I'm doing is that I'm sort of bringing out some of this hay kind of foreground mud, whatever it is, I don't really know. And I'm just creating a little bit of a texture with my rigger brush. And it gives a nice texture, and it means also that for me, I don't have to paint to the edges of the paper. I can suggest that something is going on here with just my texture from this. And I sort of know that this is a good way to go because I've worked this way before. When I see something new happening that excites me and interests me, I want to explore it that much more. So this rigger brush has kind of been doing that for me, is that I can really have some fun with it. And as you can see, I'm just letting colors sort of blend and move on their own, because one thing I know for certain is that the blending of these colors is going to be really much more interesting if I let the paints do the work rather than me trying to control it all. And so again, I sort of wait to see what's happening with the colors as they move themselves. If I don't like it, I could always correct it, but most of the time I'm pretty happy with what happens with watercolor moving on its own. And you could see I just sort of suggested a whole lot of texture here, just with my rigger, dragging out some colors and a little cross hatching because it looks a little hay-like. And again, I don't want to fuss with things that just don't mean anything to me. And I could always go back and of course adjust it if that's something I wish to do. And one of the things that I like to think about when I am painting is the idea of getting a good part of the painting colors down early on. And by doing that, I'm not really looking at a blank piece of paper, and I'm not, I'm also not fussing like with every single little piece. I'm getting a good chunk of this sort of out of the way and letting it explore itself as it moves around. That feels really like a great rough little, hay-like kind of road to me. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Jan, we have someone who wants to know what is a rigger brush?
Oh, good question. And thank you for asking. A rigger is a very, let me go a little closer for you. It's this long, it has, let me find my camera, sorry. So it's a very long, narrow brush. Why can't I see it? Okay, there we go. So there it is. It's very, very long. And it was really developed to do rigging on boats, interestingly enough. Yeah. And so what it does is it sort of lets me be a little sloppy with it and get these very, very fine little marks that I have over here, because I could just drag it out and create what I call our rivers, just pulling that point out. So it was not really, it was developed to actually paint the rigging on on boats. And it's also really good for grass. Here's a couple of more. Here's another one. It's a little bit bigger one there. They're just great little liner brushes. And I think it's a little different than a liner. I think a liner brush is perhaps not as long. It's not, doesn't come to the point that the rigger does, but they are a little not as long. The riggers are great little brushes, and I really enjoy working with them.
Do you have a favorite brand, someone asked?
I have a few. Um, what I This is a silver, again, let me get my camera here, a silver black velvet script. It's called a script, a 307S. This is from Cheap Joe's. And I really like this brush because I feel that it gives me, it's synthetic, which I like. I don't really want any brushes that aren't synthetic. So I really do like those brushes. And then when you get back into the museums. This is from the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, where I had a trip. And they have these brushes. I also have got one at the Met, and I've gotten them in different, the Morgan Library. When I've been to these different exhibitions, I've been to them, and they're really, they have them just sitting there, you know, to buy in in their gift shop. So when you're able to get back into your norm of going and seeing these things, check out these are like about a number 10, and I like them a lot. So I'm going to go in and I'm sorry, go
Another
ahead.
question was what you used to draw the outline of the children.
Yeah, so that I like doing a contour drawing. You can either use a projector or a transfer paper. And I have, so I have a projector that I like to use. And it's called Camera Obscurus, which means, I don't know. I don't know what it means actually, but it's pretty, something that's very utilized a lot by most of the talent that I see. Some do draw their own paintings, paper. I don't suggest that unless you're very good at painting. And I'll tell you why. I don't want people erasing anything that's going on their paper, because it ruins the fibers of the paper. So I'm really not a very big fan of drawing, unless you're plein air. And of course, then you sort of have to do that. But that whole idea of drawing it and then erasing and then drawing it and then erasing it, it ruins your paper, and it gives you a very, then what happens is your painting is compromised because the fibers are disturbed, and you're going to be struggling with your paper. So I'm not about struggling. I like to paint. I can draw. I like to draw, but I like to paint more. So I look for any way at all to give me a chance to get my marks. So when I'm doing a contour drawing, it isn't that I'm drawing it at all. What I'm doing is I'm anticipating the marks that I'm going to be needing and using on for my painting. And that's very different. So thank you for the question. And it's a really good question. And I will say this, a lot of people say, oh, that's cheating. Well, I just say it isn't, because painting and drawing are not mutually exclusive at all. And one is not cheating. You still have a whole lot to learn. And ask any of my students, you have a lot to learn, even in terms of just painting. You've got a long way to go. So it's not cheating. It's just a great way to find the marks that you're going to be utilizing to paint. And
Jan, you use just a simple fine pencil whenever you draw, correct?
yes, I'm using just a simple mechanical pencil like this. You probably get 10 of them for $1 or something. That's all you need really, because it keeps a nice point on it. It's always pointed, and you don't have to worry about it going dull and sharpening it. So I really do encourage that also. So I'm just going in and I'm just going to come a little closer here so you can see I'm just adding her clothes a little bit, and I'm just doing it in a way that's sort of connecting everything. And she's in shadow, so I'm going to actually go a little darker with even the back of her head, because and that's another thing that I do see is that, everybody wants to say, oh, it's the back of her head, and you want to paint every piece of hair, and you don't have to do that. You can really suggest this is their backs, obviously, and we don't need to go overboard in terms of finding details. There's something really nice about letting the viewer come into your painting and figure out things and find answers for them and connect dots that maybe you didn't finish for them. It's just something I've always done. I went to FIT, and that was just a big part of, we would draw all day, every day for hours with live models. And it was really fun to find ways in which to interpret the model and what we saw and leave things out, perhaps that really didn't need to be overly suggested. Overly drawn, I meant it could be left suggested, which was what I sort of, one of the things that sort of became my style and approach to it. I didn't draw everything. So I kind of stick to that to this day. So you can see that I have a lot of different colors going on in here with her. And I'm not really separating her hair from her body, from her top, from her bottoms. I'm just dropping it in and letting it all kind of move itself, just to be sort of suggestive. Again, she's very much, if you look at the photo, she's very much in shadow. Okay, so I'm really just imitating that. And what happens is that when you look to do that, it's a really cool kind of way of approaching a painting, saying, well, I don't have to give it all away. I know that there's something going on there, but her body language sort of says it all to us, and we don't have to go beyond that. So I'm just going to go in, and that's her hand here. And then I want to go in and do some of that pumpkin that she's holding. Usually you work left to right. I have no idea where I'm working right to left right now. I really shouldn't be, but I am. The reason why is because I'm right-handed. So now this whole area is really, really wet. So I might have to work upside down to get here. We'll see how we do. So the question becomes, how much information do you need to give your viewer before you say, oh, that's enough. I don't want to give more information. I want them to sort of understand what I'm doing here and what I'm painting, and let that be sort of the more about how you're stopping yourself from overdoing a painting, because that's also a big part of what I hear is, I don't know when to stop. I keep going. I overwork it. You know, those are very, very common things that I hear. And so,
Jan, whenever you use your camera obscura, is that something that you can just purchase online somewhere?
yeah, I use something called, yes, you can. They're all over the place, actually. They're coming out with some really good ones. I haven't explored any of them because I've just been using the one that I have. I got it from Jerry's Artorama, and it's called the Copy Cake, and it actually clamps onto my desk and gives me an opportunity. I have to work at night because I have to work in the dark. I have windows in that room. So, I have to really go ahead and make sure it's extremely dark to just move this out of my way so that I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so yeah, they're readily available. I've also heard that people have used projectors, like the Epson projector, which I have used in my classes for workshops. So I'm painting and I'm projecting it onto a screen. You could project it onto a wall and then paint the wall. You know, you put your photo and you're painting paper that you're going to be transferring it onto the wall, and you could do a very, very nice contour drawing that way as well. Or you could use transfer paper, which works really well. You just have to be sure that it's not carbon paper, because carbon paper is a little harsh and very clunky. So yes, there's lots of ways to get a really nice mark. To me, it's about finding the right marks. And when I find the right marks, I'm really happy because it frees me up to do a really good painting. So by having these marks really helps me to know that I don't have to we're not painting like, within lines, like paint by number. That's not what we're doing here. We're painting. And so what happens is it frees me up to give me the opportunity to explore beyond the photograph, if you know what I mean. Now, I'm just melting some of these marks down because it's just too much of a good opportunity not to just soften those marks to go right into a shadow. I just have to do it. It's a great way to do it. So, and to me, this really is about the shadow. So I really love this shadow that's just appearing underneath her and the wagon. And the trick to shadows, it's an interesting thing. The trick to shadows is actually connecting them, not having them disconnect at all, having them totally connected and all working together. So it's something you have to actually do pretty fast, is to get the shadows down. And of course, they're elongated from where she was. And this is where I get into some color temperature. So color temperature for me is like if I'm outside and it's warm out and I'm in the sun, I feel yellows and oranges and golden, sort of warmer tones. As soon as I go into a shadow, I am cool. And so therefore, I would change, it's a color temperature, I would change it to be cool colors, violets, blues. Those tend to be cool colors in my book. So what I like to do is switch my thinking and say, well, what's the color of a shadow? Well, it's really up to you what you want it to be. And so for me, I love the idea of these shadows being these beautiful, cool shades. And I do work fast, as my students know, but the idea is that I'm working it fast so that I'm able to get that shadow to be down in one clean sweep if I can, which is pretty much what I'm doing. So there's that shadow. Let me back out of it, show you where it's going. Now you feel the shadow coming right off of her, melted right from her shoes. Yeah. And it's moving, so it's really a great interpretation of it. So I'm using some nice violets and blues, and I'm seeing all this great stuff of all these interesting places of how the shadows have are being kicked by the sun. And using cool colors. So I'm using my violets, I'm using my blues, and by using my ceruleans on top of the orange that we had underneath it, that was my first color. So of course, that is something that I love to do, which is called bridging the palette. And so I like to do that because it gives us a chance to have color in many different areas. So let me explain to you about bridging the palette. And of course, my students know about this because I talk about it all the time, but there's a lot of people on here that may not know that terminology.
I do think you have some new students with us.
Oh, that's great. Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy that you're here. I love doing this. I love doing these demos. It just makes me very, very, very happy that we could come together and do this, you know, amidst everything going on. So let me talk about bridging the palette a little bit with you, because it's a very, very important piece that most people don't think about. And that is that color, you want your colors to be not just in specific places, but in throughout the painting. It helps the painting to be what I call painterly. And so while I didn't see blue in the background here, and I don't see violets and blues and oranges in the foreground and in the shadow, I'm interpreting all of that. And I'm saying, well, I'm going to interpret it because that's what I want my painting to be about. And so people have, you know, begun to see that I have a particular approach and style, which we all develop, you know, when we're painting. We all come up to this idea of, how do I find my style? And where is it, and having it look different than the teachers or whatever. So that's all part of it, is where you choose to introduce other colors and whatnot, and how you get there. Okay, I'm going to do the little boy. This is sort of dry, so I could work up here now. So you'll notice I'm sort of doing him as I did her, in this sort of very kind of flowing way from coming down. Let me just switch brushes. Sometimes that's important to have all your brushes ready to go, so that you you're not searching for anything. It's all right there at your fingertips. And I'll just talk a little bit about the classes for those of you who don't know me or know anything about my classes. Is I teach Fearless Watercolors. I have classes that go on twice a week on Zoom, and you could find, I have YouTube videos, tons of them, and I have a supply list on my website, and I, you know, love this process. This is just, to me, like, oh my goodness, it's just so wonderful. So I welcome any of you that would like to come in and try a class. And I guess maybe if any, Susan, maybe you could put my email in there for me while I'm painting, if anybody's interested in
Sure, I
finding.
can do that. Also, your website is just Jan Guarino Fine Art.
Yes, janguarinofineart.com. And my email is jan@janguarinofineart.com. So it's kind of easy. So janguarinofineart.com. Thank you. So if anybody has any questions or, wants to hop in on a class and see what it's all about or whatever, I love, love, love teaching. And we always do different things. We're just finishing up a workshop right now. We did a whole portrait workshop. So then we decided to do figures within, instead of just faces. So we're just finishing up that workshop, which we're calling From Faces to Figures. And where are we going next? I don't know. I think it might be, there's a holiday card workshop that I have going on. I'm doing that with Helen Murdoch Prep that does calligraphy. So we're going to be doing a calligraphy painting, creating greeting cards, holiday cards. And and then we're going to be doing winter scenes, neutrals, the neutrals of winter, which is, oh, so much fun. From fur to feathers to fur, doing birds and animals. So we've got a lot going on, actually. I have a lot of plans, just kind of take us right through our winter time. So you can see he reads well, and I'm just going to wait till, I guess I could get it now, his hand. I want to put that in also. So let's just get his hand. So watercolor is always a balance of water to paint. That's what it just is. It's just how much paint are you using? How much water are you using? And that just requires, a process of exploring it yourself and feeling it, wow, exactly out that way. I do have some beginner workshops on my website, on my YouTube channel, which the link is on my website, I think. Yeah, it must be, right? I'm trying to think as I'm doing this. Okay, let's get that wagon done. And then we'll have a good amount of this done pretty much within a time frame, which always makes me happy that I love working fast. It's fun for me to work fast because I don't overwork it. I may have to sit with it for a little bit and sort of see if there's anything else I need to do. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what, I said everything I want to say, and I just really want it to be as expressive as I made it. So sometimes I just need to sit with it and fix it in a little bit or finish it or whatever that might be. So yeah, sometimes it just requires a little bit of time. What I like to do is put it in a mat and take a look at it from a bit of a distance and put it vertical and stand back from it. And that's a nice way to also see your work and be able to determine, am I done? And I'm really never sure. But there's a point where the painting just talks to me and says, yep, I'm done. There's nothing else you need to do here. And it does talk to me. And if you listen, yours will talk to you too. And that's how you stop yourself from overworking it, is just stopping and letting it rest. People will hack away at it too. That's another thing that happens, that they just keep working it and working it and working it, thinking that they're making it better, when indeed you're just working it and not necessarily better. So you can see I'm saving those little slats. I'll go in a little closer for you on this one. So that's just saving my whites. That's all that is, just saving my whites. And it's not that hard to do without masking fluid. I rarely use masking fluid. Occasionally, but mostly I prefer not to. Mostly I prefer to have it be as sparky whites, as I call them, because there is there's a quality to your whites when you leave them. And it's different than if you mask. Masking is tough stuff. It's not always the easiest way to get your whites. because masking could go on a little gloppy. And when it goes on too gloppy, you think, well, if I save it, I could go back. And that's a tough call. I don't generally do that. I generally will look to save my whites early on and just know where I want them to be. And so that is actually part of my process of my contour drawing, is saying, well, what am I going to paint? What marks am I painting? And therefore, by knowing that I could draw them, and I could say, well, this is a white that I want to save. This is a dark that I want to paint. And so by having that information on my contour drawing really does help me to navigate my painting when I sit down to paint. I've already chosen and decided a lot of that information. And so in having that information, it gives me that much more freedom when I'm painting. I don't have to think about things like that. I'm like, oh, what's that mark? Well, if I look at my photograph, I could see, oh, I know exactly what that mark is. I know exactly what I meant to do there. I know exactly, oh, that's a white. Okay. Oh, that's a dark. Okay. I have some answers. And so the answers are already on my drawing, on my paper, and ready to go. And when things are nice and wet, it's a nice time to charge up your painting also. Just give it a little bit extra darks and lights and whatnot. Now I want to get some of these tires in. So let's get that in. Now that this is sort of dry down here. And then really, as far as fussing with it, you could see now how the background really is supporting the sharpness of them. And that's what I really wanted to do, was really have that be the conversation. So also knowing what I want the conversation to be early on going into the painting helps as well. Why the question, it's an interesting thought actually, to say, why am I painting this? What brings me into painting this? Why am I interested in painting it? And letting those answers come to you, and those become the reasons why you decided to paint it, and why you are then this way you could focus in exactly where you want to focus in. So a lot of times I'll supply my students with a contour drawing, not all the time, but sometimes. And the reason I actually prefer them not to use it, or to just use it as reference, is so that they can find the answers that they want to paint, which is really much more important, is why are you painting this? What brought me to paint this? What's my interest here? Okay, I'm going to get this other one, and then I want to do the pumpkins, and then I think we're going to be pretty much on time, which makes me happy that I can pretty much show you how to get a painting done in a fairly short time. I am working, this is like 1/8 of a sheet right now, so it's not a very big piece of paper. It might be 7 by 10. I like having all my supplies right here, right beside me here. So if you're lefty, you have it on your left side. And if it's your righty, you have it on your right side. It's very important. Keeping yourself, rather than reaching across and your water splattering and all that's going on. One of the first things I would do within a class, actually. Okay, let's get the pumpkins. And actually, I do see a little bit more up here of the back of the, or actually that's the front of the wagon. What's good about that is that I could go very dark there, and I could say, save sort of the darks. I could paint the darks and save the lights that are hitting the pumpkins. I like that nice dark. I may go a little darker. So I just liked how dark that went. So I'm just going a little darker in other spots before I go into the pumpkins. Because, and here's a good one, color gets the credit, but contrast does the work. These are all things that we practice in the class at the moment. See how those dark lines just really gave it a 3D effect, right? Just works. I could go in here and separate her pants. I'll just show you that really quickly. So if I'm looking at her and I'm saying, okay, let's see, how am I going to separate her shirt and her pants from each other? All I have to do is put a line right here and just carry some of that color down a little bit. And that sort of says it, right? That says there's two different things there. If you really felt the need to do that, I really, feel like I could go in there and just fix some of her hair and whatnot, but I want to get the pumpkins done for you. So let's go in and get so I'm always thinking color wheel. As again, my students know, I always think color wheel in terms of getting my colors down. And so I'll start with, this is a yellow that I'm starting with here. See, that tells me I want to paint back here to get that pumpkin to pop up, but I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to paint sections, some of these little sections. And you don't need a whole lot to say pumpkin. That, it kind of does it really quickly. Let's get this big guy right here. So I'm leaving the white that is where the sun is hitting it the most. And I'm giving it a nice gradation of color coming down and going into the shadow area. And again, the question is how much do I have to say for you to know that these are pumpkins? And we could, of course, go way beyond that if we wanted to. Now, a fun way to do shadows, I'm going to take my cerulean, which is what we started with in the very beginning, and I can go ahead and drop some cerulean in these little shadowy areas, like right in here. And that is separating one pumpkin from another. And when orange and blue, red and green, yellow and violet, those are complementary colors. When they touch, they sort of, when they sit next to each other, they complement each other. When they blend, they mute each other down. So I guess that's why the holidays are, sort of with those colors, red and green, right? I don't know what blue and orange, I guess, is Mets or something. I don't know. So rather than making these stems brown, I would rather go in and say, well, let's just make them blue and orange and let them make their own brown. Much more interesting to do it that way. So I'll do it again here. I'll say, okay, here's my blue. And I love those little twisty stems. They're sort of just so interesting. Well, that wasn't blue. I guess that was more dragon's blood. So I'm adding some blue now. So when I'm painting, I'm more concerned with the things that are happening on the page here than most anything else. So I'm looking to react to the things that are happening on my paper. And if I like what's happening, I let it be. I don't really touch it. I do want to push that right there a little bit with a little bit of color. So I'm going to take a little bit of this, and that's going to push out that top of that pumpkin. Okay, let's see. Yep, so there's stuff I want to do in here, definitely. I'll just keep working till, because I think I have another 5 minutes. So here's another thing that I like to do, guys, is keep my details within the center of the paper. So what I like to think about is the center of interest being somewhat close to my center of my paper. It doesn't have to be dead center. It could be, you know, close to center. But what I'm saying is that I'm cognizant of the fact that I don't want my eye to be drawn too far out of the painting. And so I like keeping it like right where it is. So I'm keeping my details. So if I add details, I'm going to add details sort of in here to her hand. Maybe I'll add a little bit of some folds in her shirt. Maybe paint her back leg a little darker. You know, these are all things that we could do after it's dry and we want to add detail in. That's the way to do it. So I don't paint my details all in the moment. I like adding the washes and then going back and doing my details later. Because I think when what I find is when I start with details, that's sort of what I'm stuck with, is all a pile of details. And then it's not as successful of a painting as it would be if I just let certain things sort of pop out and be speak as I'm painting. So you remember we did that little shadow there. So now I'm just pulling out and separating her foot from the shadow. And we could add details. We could add like seams to her jeans. That's always nice. Things like that. Little things really do make a very big difference when you're doing details like that. And I love details. It's just, to me, there's a time for them. And this, you know, it's not in the beginning. And I think what I've seen is most students get a little concerned that they're going to lose their detail, or they're not going to be able to find their detail, or they're not going to be able to go back and do their detail. You always have time to add the detail. And so I generally prefer to use my littlest brush last, except when I'm doing textures like I did before with my rigger. So I got my rigger now, and I'm just doing a little bit of detail on her hair. Just kind of has like a little ponytail going on.
Jan, if you'd like, I can unmute people so they can ask you questions directly.
Absolutely. Yes, please, by all means.
And also, we did have one person who wants to see how you have your palette set up.
Sure. And that information, by the way, is on my website under supplies and templates. I actually not only give you a supply list, but I actually show you exactly what my my palette looks like and all the colors that are in here. So this here is actually a downloadable file on my website, and as well as a template for this.
Yeah, no, not yet.
Is there a question? I hear somebody talking. Is there a question? Hello?
I think they might have been talking to someone else in the room.
I think that happens a lot. I know. They don't realize. We hear dogs bark, phones ring. So you can see how I built that hair really quickly right there, right over that wash. I hear a TV.
If you don't have a question, you can mute yourself.
Zoom stuff takes a little time to get used to. I know it does.
But Jan, thank you so much again. This is just
I
wonderful.
think that's that feels like I achieved what I wanted to achieve with it.
Want to take a look?
Looks great.
Yeah, so I feel like I achieved exactly what I sought out to do. You know what I'll do? Let me just switch it back for 1 second and I'll just put them side by side. So here's my reference photo and here's my painting. So here's the goal, guys, is to, and I hear this a lot, have your photo look better than your, have the painting look better than the photo. That's really the goal, right? Make it painterly, have fun with it, explore the things that brought you into the painting. That's really what you really want to do, is find the things that speak to you about a photograph. Why do you want to paint it? What is it about it? Well, I don't like this, but I like this. All right, cut that out. Who cares? We don't need that. You know, just make it your own. Yeah.
Love
Any
it.
other questions? Thank
Love
you.
it. Absolutely great. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all for coming on. This is really just so much fun. And thank you, the libraries, for supporting the arts and bringing all of this to us. It's just such a wonderful thing to have you all here and doing this together, and knowing that you at any time have that opportunity to take a photo and make it art. Then you hang it on a wall, right? Then you frame it and you hang it on a wall. Oh, there was one thing. Could I just switch gears? One quick thing. I wanted to show them my cropping system. So all this is a piece of, this is 2 pieces of a mat that I cut apart, and within there is my, that shows you a little bit closer how it will look matted and framed. And so this is a really valuable tool that I love to use in class, and some students come in with it all, all set to go. So that also helps you to transition from, oh, sorry about that. I just turned my video off. That helps you transition from just a flat piece of paper to now it's art, and you look at it that way. So it's
Great.
4:59.
Doesn't get much closer than that. Thank you.
I
Thank you very
know.
much.
Like I said, there's little things that I would do, but pretty much this is maybe a little texture. That's about it. But you can always
All
add
right.
that. Thank you,
Thank you.
library. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
See
Jan.
everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
If you want to sign up for my newsletters, come into a class, you're welcome to watch and join me at any time. And so good to see so many familiar faces and so many new ones. So thank you, guys. Thank you always for your support. Love seeing you there.
All right. Till next month.
Till
Bye,
next
everyone.
month. See
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.